All right, hello, my name is Jon Witt, and this is a mobility class for your neck, shoulders, and spine. I'm going to primarily focus on the thoracic and the neck. I'll make it really simple in the beginning, and then as you get more aware, then there can be some movement in terms of moving the spine. But like if I had something going on my neck, I could definitely focus more on my thoracic, and that can really help. If I had something going on my neck, you would think moving the head and stretching it, it can work, right? But it may be complicated, and that's why I would focus more on the thoracic, or focus more on the lower back, or focus more on the lower body, just as an example. But you feel good. This is great preventative mobility, so that you don't have problems with your neck, you don't have problems with your thoracic, and it'll just add more mobility in terms of how you move. So I have some props. I have a block. I have a yoga wheel, and I do have a sandbag. You don't need all of those things. I mean, if you do have them, and there's ways to improvise, and I'll give you tips when I'm doing those things. But most of the class is standing, but you could certainly do this in a chair. You know, when I'm moving my arms, if I was sitting in a chair, I would just need the freedom of moving my arm freely. So if I was sitting on the side of a chair, that's how I would do it in terms of someone that, couldn't be on their feet. But I'm just going to have my hands on my hips, and I'm just going to be moving my pelvis in a circular motion. And if you're very tight, this is probably the best and easiest way of getting your hips to move. So I'm just kind of moving around, and it could be really slow. Sometimes when I do this with people, they have some arthritis in their hips. So I keep the repetitions low, and I keep the motion relatively small. And I wouldn't do it, for a really, really long time for someone like that. But I'm going to move the hips around in the opposite direction. And, just as your pelvis moves better in space, you'll notice that the upper body will move better. But this is super simple. I'll show you another way that you could do this that's a little bit more simple. But in moving the pelvis, you can use your feet. I'm in a slight posterior tilt. For me, naturally, I sit in an anterior tilt, so it's good for me to remind myself that my tailbone needs to move down when I stand, and when I'm sitting in a chair even. So I'm going to come back into the middle, and this is what I'm talking about, is I'm just going to let my hips sway to the side. So my pelvis is moving out to the side. Something similar to a triangle. So if you have some experience with yoga, you're moving your pelvis laterally, and then that's stretching out the posterior of the hip. Then I'm going to take the hips over to the left side, and it's going to be different for most people in going in one direction more than the other. So my right hip is stronger in a lot of ways and tighter, and my left hip is it's not as strong. So I almost feel like more of a stretch on my left side for that reason. And you may have a little bit of scoliosis, so you can really kind of alter the hips with this. And then I'm just coming back into the middle, and then as I'm back in the middle, I'm going to go into the posterior tilt. So I'm going to move my tailbone down, and then I'm sticking my butt out. I'm bringing it down. My knees are bent. It's a little bit easier to do. So I'm sticking it out. I'm bringing it down. Strong through the tailbone. Very good for the lower back. You can stick it out, and then bringing it down. And when I say strong, that's what I'm using. But maybe you're not applying so much strength. You got to kind of figure out what's the type of how much leverage you're using in any position. All right, but I'm just going to come back into a standing position, and then as I'm standing, I'm going to be moving my hips more, I would say, like individually. So right hip is lifting and left hip is lifting. So think of it as a pulley system. So my left hip is lifting, my right hip is lowering, and what people will do is they'll kind of side tip, which is okay, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, but in moving up and down the pelvis, it's going to help with moving the upper body more. Right? If you haven't moved like this, you'll get really hot, which I think is a good thing in terms of circulation. So I'm going to come back into the middle, and then I'm going to move my pelvis. See how my head's staying in place? So I'm just circling my pelvis, a little bit different. So like some people have an easier time moving like this, and some people have an easier time moving like the first variation. But I'm not moving my head, I'm not moving my torso. So I'm going to be moving my pelvis in the opposite direction. Right? And, you know, with something new, just get familiar with it, just get used to it. Shouldn't hurt at all. And so you're like, oh, that first movement was better. You could always go back to that. As your pelvis loosens up, you know, then you can go back to like this type of version. So I'm coming back in the middle, and when I come back in the middle, I'm going to be moving my pelvis in a figure eight. So my left hip is lifting, my right hip is lifting. Notice that as my one side lifts, then my other side drops. So just as your hips loosen up, that's a great option. But a little bit easier is I'm going to rotate my pelvis to the right, and then I'm moving my hips to the left. So really slow. Be careful with your knees. So I'm moving left, moving right. And the focus of the class is the upper portion of your spine. But if your pelvis is locked in place, it's going to be very difficult for you to move your neck. It's going to be very difficult for you to move the thoracic. So I'm just coming back into the middle. So just take the arms into a T position, like a capital T. My thumbs are up, and then rotate the thumbs down, right? Strong rotation in the shoulders, and then rotate the thumbs back, right? Now, most likely one shoulder's weaker, so on the weak side, it's probably the non-dominant side for you, is work a little bit stronger on that arm, just a little bit. And it's very easy to manipulate from the elbow or the wrist, and that's what would hurt, right? If you overdo it, shoulder's not going to hurt, it's going to be the elbow or the wrist. So you can rotate down and forward. So with shoulder mobility, because people are so tight in the shoulders, that's where it can be problematic in the wrist and elbow. You know, when you get into like more, greater ranges with the arms. So I'm going to rotate down again. I'm going to rotate back. I'm going to rotate forward, down and in, and then rotating back. And then I'm holding that, and like again, if you can, just rotate a little bit more through that non-dominant arm. And then take the arms into a cactus position. And then in cactus, kind of like what we just did, but now the effort is I'm pulling my elbows down. These are really difficult to do up against the wall. But for here and now, it's like a good starting position. So I'm bringing my elbows into the body, and I'm emphasizing more on one shoulder. So if you look at your shoulders when you're in front of a mirror next time, the shoulder that's higher is what you want to pull down more. I'm going to take the arms all the way up overhead, so my shoulders up towards my ears, and then I'm going to come back to here in a cactus, and then I'm pulling straight down. So as I'm pulling down, I'm emphasizing more on, for me, it's my left shoulder. For you, it might be your right. I'm going to take it back up again. Shoulders all the way up towards the ears. Push through your feet. Drop through the tailbone if you're a person that, isn't really rooted in your legs. Go back into cactus and just pull down one more time. So pull down through your left elbow or left shoulder. And if you don't know, you could just do it individually. So I'm just doing it with one arm, because you might not have that awareness. And I could do it with the right arm. It feels good on both sides for me, but I could do this over and over and over again on my left side, and it probably won't be as mobile as my right, maybe never, right? And that's okay. So I'm just bringing the arms down. So I'm just going to move my arms just a little bit, just to get the arms to move a little bit. So see how my arms are wide. I'm going to be moving my right hand to my left, and then creating a rhythm. So if you have stuff in your knees, just like a golf swing, you pick up that heel as you're swinging the club. So it could be the same thing. I mean, you could stay flat in the feet, but just get the arms to be straight and transfer the weight from one foot to the other. And, move really slow, right? Doesn't have to be really fast, but then as you're, generating more awareness, or you understand it more, then you can really pick up the speed. And something like this, as you get the hang of it, it can be a minute, could be 2 minutes, it could be more than that, really. And something with like simple movements, it's something that you could do many times, like, which can be really beneficial. And then there's sometimes, you don't want to use so much repetition. Your arms, if you're not conditioned, you'll feel like arms will get tired and maybe there's a burning happening. And then I'm just going to take it out to the side, right? So just move the shoulder blades in and then turn the palms up, right? And then bring the feet in a little bit closer if that's better for you. Take the arms back to cactus, and you can bring the arms all the way down. So I'm going to do some stretching for the shoulders, and then we'll go back into some more movement, and then we'll go into some more stretching or moving of the thoracic spine. So I'm taking my hands, it's very good for handstands. I'm taking my hands at the height of the shoulders, and I'm stepping back. And then as I'm stepping back, so there's two ways of doing this. So at first, just do it where your ribs are in, right? Keep your ribs in. If it's easy, step the feet back more. Just be careful if you're, on a slippery surface. But just root down through the heels and then actually lift the toes off the floor. So all 10 toes are off the floor. That'll keep the weight in the feet. And the more weight you get in the feet, then it's just going to add a greater opposition in terms of stretching out the chest and the shoulders. So then I'm going to walk my feet forward, and I'm going to walk to the wall, and I'm going to move to the wall with my chest, but I'm going to keep my hips back, right? And then I'm bringing my arms down, and as I take my arms down, right, just relaxing the shoulders. But how much leverage you use is really, you'd think more would be better, but in any of these more stretching type of positions, you may actually want to, do less with that. But I'm going to, what I did earlier with the pelvis, so see how I'm turning my pelvis and I'm turning my torso, then I'm turning my pelvis, I'm turning my torso. So we're going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do it where I'm going to use my left arm. So when I take my left arm up, overhead, I'm turning my pelvis, I'm turning my torso, I'm bringing the arm forward. So I'm bringing it up, and then reaching back in space. I'm bringing it forward. But you want to turn the torso. So when you're turning back, the arm's actually going to be more an internal rotation. So you're getting the best of both worlds with this. So I'm bringing it up one more time. And I'm turning. I could look to the hand. Very good for your neck, very good for your eyes. So I'm going to take the right arm forward in space. I'm lifting, turning my pelvis, turning my torso, bringing the arm back in space. I'm bringing it forward, I'm bringing it up. I'm turning, right? Bringing it forward. And maybe it's just up, If you couldn't go into a full rotation, eventually you can, right? And then over time, there can be some speed to it, right? But just have the arms just relaxed. And with the arms relaxed, I'm just going to do a little bit of coordination with the shoulders. So we were just moving the arms back in space, right? So I'm moving them back. Right? We've all done these to some extent, I'm sure. And then what you can do is you can rotate forward. And then I'm going to rotate my right arm back and my left arm forward. And these are really good to get the scapula to move. And what you could do is you could just take a video of yourself walking, and that's such a great way that I could help you. You know, if I saw how you walked, there's many exercises that you could use to really help the way that you walk. You should love walking. So if you don't really like walking, that's a good benchmark to have, is getting yourself to a level where you're like, I love to walk. I want to walk for miles, right? So just moving, big, you know, it's a small motion, but you could think of it as bigger. And then you can come back into just bringing the arms just to neutral or relax, right? But I'm going to get into moving the thoracic. You could use a block, you don't have to. But with the block, I like it in the singular position, in its most narrow position. And I'm going to keep my head neutral, so I'm not going to be moving my head up and down. So I'm going to hug into the block with my arms, and then I'm rounding my thoracic. And then as I'm rounding, I'm not bringing my head down. Intuitively, you want to bring your head down, but keep your head neutral. And then lift from your chest, but don't take your head back. Just keep your head as it would be neutral if we were standing. You know, in yoga we say Tadasana, but lift through the chest. Think that your chest is lifting the block more, and then come back into this rounded position, rounding the spine, and lifting the chest. Keep extending, squeeze into the block. Round your back. And it could be a ball too, right? If you got like a basketball at home, I like a basketball because it's a little bigger. You know, a beach ball, or, you know, say you had something that was bigger in shape, or a big pillow. Lifting up, tailbones down. Lift through the thoracic. And then coming forward, rounding the back. And last time back bending. Push through the feet, really try to lift up. And then come back into a neutral position. So just have the block just out in front of you. I'm going to have it here, and I'm going to take the block overhead, but I'm squeezing in. So the block is here, I'm bringing it forward, I'm bringing it up, and then when I get to a level that's a little tight, I mean, my block has weight to it, so if your block has weight, you know, you can skip that and be more overhead, but I want to keep my belly and my ribs in as I take the block overhead. It's very easy to do something like this, but you want to keep the front of your body in as you squeeze into the block. So bring the block forward, bring it down. If you had some foam blocks and this was just too much on the shoulder, you can make it wider, right? That's a very good way too. I'm just going to do this one more time, squeezing in with the index fingers, bringing it up. You know, like I said, I'm just using this as an example. Say this was tight, I would hold this. Say this was tight, I would hold this. You know, all the way overhead is good. It's just, you know, it's not necessarily like the best. It's where people want to get to. And, you know, I really strongly believe in hanging from like a pull-up bar, or hanging from an object, like hanging from a tree. It's like passive hanging, so good for the shoulders. And active hanging is really good for shoulders if they're slightly torn. So you have a tear in your shoulder. You can take your arms all the way up. You can hang from molding. Right? All this is really, really good for the shoulders. And you probably want to do it with your feet on the ground at first. You know, I'll make a video on that at some point. I actually think I have already. It's just I haven't published it. But I'll put it out, and then you'll have it. It's something that I use. You know, I probably hang on average at least 5 to say 10 minutes a day from a bar, you know, most days. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the rotations with the arms. So my left arm is now moving back in space. So I'm turning back, and then I'm bringing it forward. So I'm turning the pelvis. Say you're like, I can't take my arm up. Then it's just a partial rotation. Up and forward, taking it back, rotating, pushing through the feet. Right? Bringing it back in space. Big, big circular motion. One more time, I'm going to take it back and up, and forward and down, just so you can see. When you get good at these, do them close to a wall. You wouldn't want to touch the wall. I'll do it up against the wall just so you can see it. So my right side's at the wall. I'm bringing it forward, or I'm bringing it back in space, and then forward, back, and forward. So I need to turn my pelvis, turn my torso, turn my head, forward. Right. And then down. So I'm going to go back into stretching the shoulders, but a little bit different. So when I do the hands at the wall, my forearms are going to be at the wall. I'm going to step back, and it's a little bit more shoulder specific. And start small. Don't take your feet out too long. But when you take your feet back, if you're comfortable, then you could get more in chest and thoracic if you want to, or you can keep it hollow to make it more specific in the shoulders. I would use both, from time to time. I would change it up. I wouldn't always do it the same way. So my elbows are at the wall. I'm stepping back, and it's going to be a shorter stance because our arms aren't extended. But then, as I'm in this, I'm gonna wiggle my feet back. But again, you got to be careful if you're on a slippery surface. I'm pushing through the forearms. I'm going to posterior tilt. Right? I'm moving the weight around a little bit, if you can see that. So, like, let's say you have a tight shoulder. Work it into the tight side, but then go into the easier side, right? And when you can, lean into that opposite side. And I like moving in and out of it, because then if you just held it for a really long time, then there's the chance that you may actually have, you might do too much into the shoulder. Right? But I'm going to walk the feet forward. And then as I walk the feet forward, I'm going to lock my arms at the wall. Hands can be wider. Chest could be to the wall. I'm working into a posterior tilt just so that I'm not dumping. If I'm not in a posterior tilt, for me, I'm just using my lower back. So I'm going to the wall, but I'm trying to keep things tight so it's more shoulder specific. So, because I did say some stuff about the neck, is I'm going to be moving my head just to one side. So my head is off to one side, stretching out the left side of the neck. Right? This is like super basic. You could try having the arm out to the side or the hand at a wall, which is really nice. And then I'm going to take the head up, and then I'm moving the head over to the left side. But like I said, you get stuff in your neck, focus more on your thoracic, focus more on your lower back. Don't focus so much on the area that is irritating you. It's such a common thing. Oh, my knee hurts, my wrist hurts. You're doing too much in the afflicted area, and that's why it's not getting better. You got to work around the injury. So bring your head up, take your head over to the opposite side. Right, then bring it up and bring it to the left. And bring it up. Now, stick with that. Stick with static stretching. I find static stretching way more basic and way more comprehensible in terms of people. But when you get awareness, you can use some movement. I'm going to use and a little bit of strength in stretching out the neck. So I'm bringing the head to the shoulder, and you'll notice that more people are concerned with the aesthetic and that they're lifting the shoulder to get the head lower. And that's not that it's bad, right? But it's kind of giving you a false illusion as to how much range you're actually creating. But I'm not using a ton of effort ever here, but there's a steady effort. And then I'm going to bring it up, and then I'm going to go to the opposite side. So think of this as like level 2 in terms of the neck, right? It's just, I'm moving it. it's static, but it's more active than passive, right? But then as I get more understanding in it, I'm going to take it to one side, and I'm taking it up, and I'm bringing it up to the opposite side, taking it up, bringing it to the left, bringing it up, and then I'm going to do a forward motion and up. So I'm bringing it down, chin in the chest. Again, it could be passive. And then I'm bringing it up. And bringing it down. So say you want to do more shoulder stand, you want to do plow, right? This whole class can really help prepare you for that. So I'm bringing the chin in the chest. And lifting it up. Bringing it down and in. Strong. Eventually the chin can't touch the chest. And up. One more time down. Last time up. And then I can just bring it to neutral. So I'm going to move the arms just because we move them forward and back, just to kind of see, maybe you can do this, maybe not. But because we're alternating the shoulders, the arms can eventually, move more in a windmill kind of way. So I'm taking my arms up overhead, and then I'm bringing my left arm forward and my right arm back, right? Then I'm bringing my left arm back and my right arm forward, right? Moving my whole entire pelvis to the back arm as it's back, right? Whichever arm is behind you, that's the way that you turn. As you take it up, then right arm back. Right? Like really make a bigger motion. Super big motion if you can. And then over time you can add speed, right? So then now my right arm is moving forward, my left arm is moving back. Turn the pelvis, turn the torso, and you'll probably, it'll be weird and you might knock over a lamp or something like that. It's, it's okay if you get it a little goofy, right? It's just, you should be like, oh, this is great, my shoulders, so good. So don't get frustrated with it, practice it, look to the hands, very good for coordination. But I'm going to go back into using the block into the chest, and that's like the easy version as opposed to what I'll do on the floor with the yoga wheel. So it's, again, it's something very good to use. So I'm bringing it in the chest. I'm going to round my back. So I'm not hinging from the hips. It's not a forward bend. And I'm lifting, I'm squeezing into the block with my arms. I'm lifting. I'm extending. I'm going to round again. And the rounding is so good for posture. It's also often viewed as like, don't round your back. It's the worst thing for you. For most people, it's actually good. And before you ever get osteopenia or osteoporosis, definitely want to use this. When you get those diagnoses, if you ever get them, you may not want to do these things. And if you do them really in small doses. You wouldn't do a whole lot of these. But lifting. But a big reason why the spine gets so calcified is because it's not moving. It just is, it's a coral reef. So you want to get it strong enough so that you can move it more. And then just coming back to neutral. So I'm going to come down on the block. I'm going to use a yoga wheel, but you could use a block. I'll show you with the block just so that you have something to go with. So just for women, you got to be careful, obviously, because of your breasts. The block could be something narrow, and then I'm here, I'm lowering my head. Now, the closer the distance your knees are to your block or your prop, right, the easier it'll be. The further you stretch it out, the more weight it's going to bear. And, make it, put something over it, like a towel or a blanket or something like that, or a pillow. But just make sure that it's stable. I'm not going to use a block because I have a yoga wheel, and these are super cheap. I do recommend them if you're really wanting to improve your posture. And say you have a bolster, use a bolster or a foam roller. Right? It's just with a foam roller, you'd have to make it higher to create the same kind of leverage, because it's so low, it's not high enough to really leverage your back, right? But I'm coming forward with my sternum into the wheel, and then I'm relaxing my head down, and I'm in this rounded position, and I'm moving around a little bit. If you do have a yoga wheel, is that I can find exactly what is not moving in my spine, right? And I'm just going to take like 5 more breaths. As you get used to it, you can certainly hold it longer, but it can be really hard. A yoga block can be really hard. It can be just too much, and you got to consider how much you weigh. The heavier you are, you may not want to bring all of your weight into your spine here. Right? I'm a relatively small and light person. So I can bring quite a bit of weight into my rib cage and into my spine. So to come out, I'm going to bring my hands underneath me. I'm going to walk my knees forward and come out, and I can sit upright. But that will really help you extend. When you get up after this class, you should feel a lot taller, right, from this type of sequencing. But I'm going to use the sandbag, and if you don't have a sandbag, you could use a block, right? It doesn't have to be a sandbag, but it's to get a little bit more leverage into your back. And this is quite progressive, so maybe you just want to watch it and then go back, and you could do it again, right? You don't have to do it right now. But I'm back here, and I could just sit here into like this position, right? I could take my hands behind my head. Like, this is super basic. If I was using the block, kind of like what we did earlier for your shoulders, is I could be here, and I could squeeze in, right? And taking the block into this overhead position. And to make it easier, you lift your hips. Make it easy, if you had 2 blocks, sit on one block. That's much easier on your back, right? It's actually how I'm going to do it. So like if I did, this is probably too heavy, to be honest. It's just it's something that you could see more. That's the big reason why I did this. So less weight is better. It could be a foam roller, a block. It doesn't have to be weight, but I'm going to bring my arms up and then back, right? But I'm squeezing my ribs, my front body into the yoga wheel, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up, and this is actually easier. When your hips are elevated, it's actually easier. It's when you lower your hips, right? That's where you're going to feel more leverage in your back. So you can lift and lower. And again, I don't recommend a weight. I would use, something lighter to start with, like a yoga block. So keep your hips up, then lower your hips, descend your hips, and then as it gets easier, then you can take the block out. You can sit lower, and you could do this multiple times. Any of the things that we use today, you could create blocks for yourself, and it doesn't have to be the sequencing. It's just the sequencing that I came up with that I felt would work for you guys. So I'm going to come back up with the hips. I'm going to sit down, and then when I come down, I'm going to sit just on my block on the second level. So just kind of sitting with my feet outside of my block, squeezing in, and the higher you sit, so much better for the upper body, right? just to kind of do a little bit of a counter in terms of the spine. So I'm going to bring my left hand into my chin, and I'm just turning my torso. Don't turn the head. Just turn through the thoracic. You won't turn as much. You won't twist as much, but it's better than using your hand in some regards, right? Sometimes it's better to use the hand to really get more leverage, or to have someone adjust you, right? That works. But just to do more in terms of strength, in my opinion, it's way better, right? You want the strength to support the range, not just flexibility. You know, the flexibility helps the mobility, and the mobility helps the flexibility, right? So I'm going to bring my hand into my chin on the right side, and I'm turning, and you'll see like it's more difficult to turn to one side, and that's okay. Right. Keep lifting. So where the block was, or the yoga wheel was, in the front of you or behind you, is where you want to be lifting from. And then I'm turning forward, and I could relax. You could sit in any position. You know, you don't have to sit like I am. It just was an example in terms of sitting up nice and high. So I hope that class was good for you. Of course, take a break, lie down. You know, that's something I strongly believe in. It's so good to do restorative yoga. You know, if you're just tired, you know, obviously take breaks throughout the day. But when you have good energy and you're feeling strong, right, do your practice, whatever that may be. You know, if you want to do more yoga, of course. If you want to weight train, of course. I would work more on what I'm deficient in, like when I have the time, right? That's what I would do, is focus more on what your weekend, and then of course do what you do, right? Do what you love, but have it a little bit more balanced, and you'll get more benefits from it. So you can leave a comment. You can share the class or my information with people. I'd love to help more people. And you could also subscribe if you're not. Thank you if you are a subscriber. And hopefully I'll see you soon in class. I have a class tomorrow morning. It's through Zoom, and that's at 9:30 Eastern time. And it's a Hatha class similar to this, but it's, you know, depending on who I have in the class will determine how, you know, what I actually use within the class. But then I could see you or could correct you if that's something that you're interested in. All right, have a beautiful weekend, and take care of yourselves.